When younger children wander off, you expect to find them quickly. But what if that's not the case, and instead they vanish in ways that defy all logic? These aren't just strange cases, they are part of Missing 411, the chilling investigative series by former police officer David Paulides. What happened to these kids is still a mystery, and it's the kind that keeps you up at night. Let's dive right in. Back in summer of 1954, a young couple, Mr. and Mrs. Bailey, had come up from Thorndike in Maine, US to spend the day picking blueberries with some of their friends. They also brought their little boy Gary, who was just 3 years old at the time. The mountain is this beautiful and quiet spot surrounded by woods, and it sits right next to the Fry Mountain State Management Area. Now, while Mrs. Bailey was with the group, chatting and picking berries, Gary was with his father. Kenneth, who was actually blind, had his son close by so that he could keep an ear on him. The small boy was playing around the trees, but at some point in the afternoon, something happened and Gary managed to slip away. When the parents realized that he was gone, they immediately began to panic. A search was launched there and then, and before too long, 500 people had joined in. You had game wardens, state police, Boy Scouts, firefighters and volunteers, all searching the area well into the night and into the next day, but there was just no sign of the small boy. Then, about 24 hours later after Gary vanished, the group heard something strange, something that did not belong to the woods. This was actually heard by two new searchers who had joined the rescue team not so long ago, and so soon enough their search, they heard this strange sound. It was coming from somewhere in the distance, and it actually sounded like a faint crying. So these two searchers followed that sound, and at the end of it, they found Gary. The boy was all scratched up, and his little face had taken some hits from the brush, but otherwise he was okay. And this is exactly where this story gets very strange. Gary wasn't anywhere near where he had wandered off. He was on the opposite side of Spears Mountain. His tracks actually showed that he had gone right over the top of that hill, which is about 1,400 feet up. And he was found miles away from where he had disappeared. So let's think about that for a second. This was a 3-year-old boy. He had no supplies, he was not properly clothed, and he definitely had no shoes for a hike like that. Yet somehow he covered miles of rough wooden terrain and crossed over a small mountain. And all of this he managed to do within just 24 hours. But that isn't everything. If kids his age get lost, they usually head downhill. But Gary, he climbed uphill and just kept going. Another thing to consider is the location of where Gary went missing. Spears Mountain is one of the hills located in the Appalachian Mountains, and in the past there have been plenty of strange and mysterious stories that all center around the area. There are the legends like the Bigfoot or the Bell Witch, and people have reported seeing strange animals and ghostly apparitions in and around there. So it is entirely possible that something else was responsible for moving Gary past that mountain. Unfortunately, when the boy was questioned, he could not really say what had happened to him, and so we shall really never have the answer. At least he managed to survive, but to this day, no one can really explain how. Back in August of 1953, a little boy named Richard Craig, who everyone called Rickie, was enjoying his day out picking huckleberries with his parents. They were deep in the wilderness of southern Washington, about 25 miles south of Mount Adams, near a little place called Trout Lake. This remote area is very high in elevation and has plenty of thick forest around it. It was a very nice warm morning and everyone was having a good time, but around 10 a.m., Rickie's parents realized that they could not see their son anymore. They yelled out for him a few times, but Rickie was not responding to them, which was totally out of character for him. The parents began looking around the nearby trees, and when they couldn't find him there, they even ventured a little further away, but again they didn't really go that far because they didn't think that Rickie could have actually gotten that far himself. But no matter where they looked, there was just no sign of him. And so after a while, the parents decided that enough was enough. And so they drove over to the Forest Service office and asked for help. And that's when things got really kicked off. You see, Rickie's dad, Elmer Craig, was a school principal on summer break. He was this sharp, responsible man, and so he insisted that he would be one of the lead searchers for his own son. By the second day, there were 600 people out in the woods looking for that boy. Law enforcement, volunteers, Forest Service crews, and even bloodhounds. The search effort was so big that they shut the entire area down, and they told every other berry picker to go home because the forest had only one mission now: find Rickie. But for 2 days they found nothing. Then, just after dawn on the third day, a logging crew who had come in to help on their day off spotted something strange that was deep in the woods. They were 3/4 of a mile off Trout Creek Road, which was over 5 miles away from where Rickie vanished. And so the crew went over to see what this thing was, and when they got in closer to it, they could see this tiny figure standing alone in the underbrush, missing one shoe. They found Rickie. He didn't cry, he didn't try to run, he just stood there. Now there's the part that still gives people chills. Doctors checked him out a day later, and what they found left them absolutely speechless. Rickie was in phenomenal condition. No serious injuries, no dehydration, no signs of trauma. And so for a 3-year-old to survive over 2 days in that dense, rugged wilderness, it just didn't add up, especially considering the condition he was found in. When they had asked Rickie what happened, like where he had been or what he saw, he couldn't really tell them. Now he wasn't really scared, he was just blank, like the whole thing had been erased from his memory. But let's think about it. 5 miles through dense forest and uneven terrain, alone at 3 years old. No clear path, no food, and 1 shoe. And yet he was fine. There's no explanation for how Rickie Craig ended up where he did, or how he survived like that. And some folks say that it was luck, but others aren't so sure. But somewhere out there, where the sun starts to dip and the woods get quiet, you start to wonder just how many things we don't understand. It was a sunny day of 7th of June 1928, and the Hamilton family of 3 were just getting ready for the day out. The family lived in this small town of Elrose, located in the Saskatchewan region of Canada, not too far away from the White Bear Lake and hills. And that day, the family wanted to go berry picking. So Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton packed whatever they needed for the day, and together with their 2-year-old son Eddie, set off. Now, because of the small child, they didn't really want to go that far, and so instead of venturing into the more forested area, they chose the thick patch of brush that was not too far away from the edge of their own town. When they got there, Eddie's mom began setting up their little base for the day, so that they had somewhere where they could chill and also change and feed Eddie wherever they needed to. And Eddie's dad began looking around to see where they should go first. And then there was Eddie, who was just so happy to be out, and as soon as his parents let go of him, Eddie began exploring the area himself. A few moments later, Eddie's mom turned around and saw that her son was not there. So she asked her husband where did Eddie go to, but he couldn't give her an answer. Now at first they didn't really think much of the situation. Eddie was just 2 years old, and so he could have only maybe gotten just a few steps away, and he's probably still hiding somewhere, thinking that this is a game. After all, that's what kids do, right? But then they realized that they couldn't hear him anymore. And so they called out to him, but Eddie was not answering. They started to look around for him, thinking that Eddie maybe was behind some tree, thinking that this is a hide-and-seek game. But the more they looked, the more they became worried. There was just no sign of Eddie anywhere. And so just like that, Eddie was gone. Now the land around where the family decided to spend the day is pretty flat. For 3 miles south, it's all low brush and open ground, at least until you hit the White Bear Hills. And those hills wrap around White Bear Lake, which is nestled in this valley with 3 long, narrow lakes. But apart from that, there are just no other hills for miles. By that point, the Hamiltons were pretty spooked out, and so they decided to waste no time. And while Eddie's father kept looking around the area, Eddie's mom ran for help. The Mounties came pretty fast, and by nightfall, a full search was underway. And over the next day, more than 200 people joined the search, but soon enough they discovered their first chilling clue. There were boot and heel prints and also some faint footprints around the area that did not match off either of the parents' shoes. Now this would have suggested that someone else apart from them had been there, but equally those prints could have been left by someone who had gone through the area before the family even got there, so nobody was really that concerned yet. After all, there was no sign of struggle or clothes or any other marks that would have been left at the scene if foul play was involved. This was still obviously very disheartening because it looked like Eddie just vanished into the thin air. The rescue efforts became the largest search in the history of the province at that point, and almost 2,000 people looked for Eddie over the next 3 months. But amazingly, they could not find him anywhere. Then, on October 25th, a traveling salesman was out dog hunting. He was about 3.5 miles away from where Eddie disappeared in the White Bear Hills area. And as the man was going around one of the lakes, he saw that there was something strange in the water that definitely looked out of its place. So the man decided to go over there to investigate, and that is when he made the heartbreaking discovery. Floating in the shallows was a small body of a child, and it was Eddie. Now, as sad as this story is, there's actually a lot of mystery behind it. No one could explain how Eddie vanished or how he could have gotten so far away. The 2-year-old would have needed to go through thick brush and rough terrain without ever responding to his parents' calls. And why would he do that? He had no motive to run away like that. And even if for some mysterious reason he did want to get away, he would have to climb over 1,800 feet of hills in order to be able to get to that particular lake. And mind you, there were other small bodies of water he could have stumbled into much closer to where he went missing. But somehow he ended up in that one, on the far side of the mountain. The search and rescue force also chimed in with their opinion and said that toddlers don't actually climb uphill when they get lost. They go downhill because it's their instinct. They also said that kids that young are usually found on flat ground and usually no more than 2 miles away because they are simply too small to make it further than that. This all suggested that Eddie should have been found quickly and easily, but he wasn't, not for 3 months, and not in a place a child should have ever been able to reach. And to this day, no one could ever figure it out. The footprints never led to any suspects, and say it was an animal attack, but there would have been clear signs of that. As unbelievable as this story might sound, it really did happen, so next time you go out with your kids, keep them very close, because sometimes they just disappear. Let me know which one of these stories you found the most bizarre, and also if you know of any strange disappearances like that, I'll be very happy to cover them. Until next time.